Well, welcome everyone to today's webinar titled 2025 Payment Initiatives Meeting Evolving Corporate Needs. This is Brian from Strategic Treasurer, and we're pleased you could join us as we discuss demands and opportunities in payments for 2025 and beyond, and how you can stay ahead of the curve. Our speakers for today are Pat Moy, Executive Director Receivables at Deluxe, Mike Chubb, Executive Director Receivables Product Development at Deluxe, and Craig Jeffrey, Founder and Managing Partner of Strategic Treasurer. Welcome, Pat, Mike, and Craig, and I'll now turn the presentation over to you.
Thank you, Brian. Welcome, everyone. Thanks so much for spending some of your afternoon or evening or morning with us. There's a lot of things for you to do. We appreciate you investing some time. Pat, it's good to be with you on another webinar. And Mike, I think this is our first webinar together, so I'm looking forward to it.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, a pleasure.
Excellent. So everyone, we have quite a bit of content to cover, and we'd like to head into it and give you an overview of what we're going to be discussing in the next 57 minutes or so. First of all, the situation. We'll talk about that. What are some of the developments and changes in payments? There's certainly new payment rails, new activities, but there's also demands and expectations, demands for working capital, but primarily demands for efficiency and control in the environment that we're seeing in. The second area is reducing friction. The increasing efficiency between systems matters because that's how we achieve the ability to scale. We save money. We root out defects. We root out errors, and can support the overall objectives of the organizations on the payment front. In the third area, the increasing speed. This is not just about faster payments once a payment hits the payment rail and settling, though that is a component of it. This is about efficiency and ability to scale. How much time and effort is wrapped up in each payment element? How do we increase payment processing times? And a lot of that is removing manual processes out of the work that's being done, automating more of those, making those more streamlined, which is our fourth category. So we want to reduce errors, we want to reduce time, we have to reduce defects, and we do that by having a good process, the right type of automation, and reducing manual items. Organizational relevance is how do we focus on making payments so it helps the organization address what they're trying to do. And this really makes us think about the broad impact. You may have heard us say things like end-to-end, the process within an organization, but also end-to-end to end-to-end, your process and your trading partner's process. And so if we think about that and align those towards our goals with our counterparties, with our goals for working capital, the cash conversion cycle, goals for efficiency and control, all of those will help us achieve those if we keep that broader view in mind. And then finally, we have three key takeaways. We have one, we'll focus on relevance. Where's the fit? The use of automation and AI in helping us get there. And then last, enabling better and faster payments. Better in that it addresses the needs of both organizations and all components. Faster is one of the features that makes sense. So that's our intro. That's the Cliff Notes version of what we're going to cover. And now we'll jump into what are some of the key developments. If we look at the situation, what are some of those key developments? And Pat, maybe you could kick us off on some of these key issues.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll start with one of my favorites to talk about, and what I see a lot of companies that I talk to wrestling with, which is increasing complexity and innovation. And, as we think about this topic, one of the things that I always like to say is all of the easy problems have been solved, and we're left with the hard ones. And so whether your complexity originates from, your organization being at a tipping point where legacy systems are holding you back from growth potential, or maybe you're trying to adopt some of the new capabilities in payments, right? Whether it be real-time payments, or, trying to, streamline how you, complete your order to cash life cycle faster. Um, Bringing on new tools can be complex to adopt. And one of the things that I think is inherently important in this language to remind yourself is that complexity is kind of the nature of the space that we're in. No matter what we do, no matter how we try to um, really focus on streamlining things, payments is complex. And at a certain point, we have to embrace that complexity. What I often find, though, is that we make things overly complicated. And when we make things overly complicated, that's where complexity can feel like it's insurmountable. So, as you're sort of looking at this space and trying to figure out how to handle complexity, take a step back and think about what is just a complication that we can point a strategy towards versus what's the inherent complex nature of the space that we're in. And when it comes to pointing a strategy, oftentimes leadership will, come to us, come to you all as you're looking for answers, and say things like, we need to be more innovative. And innovation's one of those big words that means everything and nothing all at the same time, because it's easy to say and hard to do. And so my advice would be clear on what innovation means to you, right? What innovation means to your organization, and then point that definition at something specific, right? This is where you can focus on looking for an efficiency or automation or personalization opportunities, but do it in a way that is rooted in a definition of how to be innovative that fits your organization, right? And innovation doesn't have to be some flashy thing. It can be a process efficiency you create that helps save time for your team, right? That can go a long way. And so I kind of look at those two spaces between efficiency and speed and complexity and innovation as, how can you look at separating what's complicated from what's complex, and how you define what innovation means to you.
Yeah, that's
So,
that's
Mike,
a
do you want to jump in?
yeah. That I want to double down on that innovation comment, right, Pat? I think we can all see the innovation that's going on around us, right? With that explosive growth of new payment technologies and systems. Craig, you mentioned it in the summary, right? Real-time payments. So if you're thinking FedNow or faster payments in the UK, the blockchain technology enabling those real-time networks, the vast amount of digital currencies that exist now, governments accepting and kind of endorsing stable coins across border. What that's resulting in is all of these massive efforts around replatforming and modernizing existing payment systems to be able to integrate with, like, again, that sheer amount of innovation going on outside, right? And if you can just think about the sheer amount of niche players that you have to integrate with now that are innovating at such speed, addressing specific markets and specific use cases. And Craig, I think that puts a lot of pressure on regulatory needs.
Yeah, the changing regulations and requirements, whether they're government induced regulations or whether they're payment rail induced regulations, right? You had the payment card industry put on PCDISS like 15, 20 years ago to protect the network. You had SWIFT, the SWIFT customer security program to protect that rail. You have things on the ACH network. There's about masking masking your account number information. There's significant numbers of regulations, including how much more information needs to travel when you're making cross-border payments, right? Additional information has to be sent. This means it's better, but it's harder because you have to change the underlying activity. And then the last one, which is probably the most depressing, is this ongoing year-over-year increase in the threats that we face. The criminals are sophisticated, they're well-funded, they're leveraging the tools that we use to, like they're using AI and deep fakes in addition to enhancing all of the traditional and neo-traditional methods of stealing from us. So there's a greater need for payment security as well. So all of these are stacking up nicely or not so nicely, but certainly nicely to make it interesting, but a significant amount of change. And that leads to pressure for sure. From the pressure standpoint, I will turn it back over to Pat. Maybe you could kick us off. I think it's Pat, Mike, and Craig. So you could start us off.
Yeah, and you know, I will put my hand up as guilty of placing demands on treasury and finance, because as one of the business leaders here at Deluxe, I'm constantly looking for, you know, visibility in, you know, the performance from a financial standpoint for my business, as well as how can I make smarter decisions, right? How can I be more informed about, you know, who our customers are, where we're growing, where there's opportunity. And those types of trends and analytics don't just come out of thin air, right? It takes time to build that data, to understand what it means to your organization. And at the end of the day, if I don't have a clear line of sight to those things, if I don't know what to focus on, I'm gonna really struggle to make impacts that, you know, the business is looking to achieve. And so when I sit here and I think about the opportunities in this space, I look at it from, you know, getting a direct benefit of how treasury and finance teams can address some of these challenges, right? And you know, it's not even just in, you know, the cash flow side of it and on the receivable side where I spend most of my day. But how do we also connect that data into market trends and customer trends, right? How do we take a look at all of this change that's happening and really, you know, start to democratize data a little bit better so that it's not siloed in places where you have to do a bunch of digging to get a single data point to turn into, you know, a criteria that you're using to make a decision. So, you know, I think that to build on, you know, what Mike and Craig were saying before, this space is going to continue to evolve. And I am learning new things every single day. And I strive to continue to learn new things every single day. But with that is going to continue to be pressure on me. And then that pressure cascades downhill to respond quickly. And not just respond quickly, but respond quickly with a well-informed stance. And the better I can do that and the more visibility I have into what's behind those insights and how to use them to make decisions, the better off the overall business is going to be.
Right. And with all of that, Pat, it's the demand to be flexible to adapt to that change, right? I mean, we all see it every day, right? Change is the only constant. I think the shift we've been seeing is the demand across the board to be more proactive about the change, right? Rather than just reacting when something happens. The demand's a place that, you know, how did you not predict this? Why can't you predict this? What do you need to be able to predict this so that we're not behind the eight ball when things, you know, do dynamically shift? Effectively, the ability to be able to pivot at any point, right? And that's resulting in the need to not only have scalable solutions, but a truly flexible foundation from which to operate. And if you think about it, this is why technology organizations, well, from a technology lens anyway, so heavy about APIs, microservices, real-time event streaming, things like that, to effectively try and be able to handle whatever gets thrown at them. Right, we're seeing that a lot now. To handle that flexibility and create, you know, ground up flexible platforms, that takes investment. So on the flip side of that, you're also seeing the ask to do more with less with everything else, right? So that's why automation now is just front and center. Many application rationalization efforts. How do we reduce costs elsewhere to be able to invest in this future state flexible platform? You know, reduction in customization, you know, out of the box solutions, whether that be ERPs, finance systems themselves. And all of this, Craig, I think also just needs really solid controls, right, across the board as we transition.
It certainly does. This idea of controls to support compliance requirements, whether it's payment rail specific or whether it's by the different regulatory bodies or law, but also having a clean set of audit trails and methods for preventing fraud, detecting fraud rapidly, right? Giving the warning, not just for when sensitive data may be leaving the company in large measure, but when maybe changes are happening to payment instructions in great levels, and then payments being triggered. So the controls come from protecting from the outside, but also ensuring that there's good governance over both the flow of funds, the protection of those, and accurately reporting that. So part of that stems into the need and the opportunity to capture the data that's necessary. We might talk about faster payments, but better payments may have an element of faster, but certainly has an element of better information, better transparency that address the efficiency, flexibility, visibility, and insight objectives that we just talked about below. So control should support that, not just be a tack on at the end. So those are some of the demands that are placed on treasury groups, those that manage payments, anybody in finance in that area. And at the same time, there are some opportunities that come up, opportunities to take advantage of better payments or faster payments. I think, Mike, if you want to start us on this one.
For sure. I guess, where do we see this friction existing, and what can we do about it, right? I think we see across the board, fragmented and disjointed systems, disparate data. If we think about we were mentioning earlier, the niche players out there with all of the innovation that's happening in the payment space, those are all external integrations, and there's just a whole bunch of variables that get thrown at you because of that. Obviously, compliance and controls, Craig, just the inherent complexity and the overall cost. What's really interesting as well, and this is something, Pat, I think we actually spoke about this a couple of weeks ago. What's really interesting is a big friction point is actually internal to companies, right? Internal standardization, right? Like we can talk about external standardization, ISO 20022 becoming mandated, but internally, how are you going to address that between groups when data is moving inside your own organization? And just think about the friction that exists in between teams, the delays even within an organization. So I guess, what do you do about it, right? I think there's a couple of key things I believe, right? One is standardize where it makes sense. Think about tech stacks, data formats, like I mentioned, ISO 20022. Automate where possible, and that's obviously a big topic at the moment, but be very strategic about that. Invest in middleware, right? The amount of players is going to keep on increasing. Innovation will continue to go. So think APIs, developer platforms, think anything that helps systems communicate more efficiently together. And then likely most importantly of all, focus on data. Think, if you can, a unified data model or just better data observability, but data quality and data governance is really huge to be able to reduce that friction to enable faster processing. Pat, not sure if you want to add there.
Yeah, I definitely want to double click on the automation piece of it, because it's going to continue to come up, right? AI and automation and all of those opportunities are going to continue to present themselves. And what's really critical for you all is having the right mechanisms in place to be able to prioritize those opportunities. So when we look at that opportunity here, and when one of the things I recommend using is putting criteria for how you prioritize things into 3 buckets. The first bucket being desirability, which is, do we really need this and do we want it, right? As a business, is this something that we are going to be using every day and looking to really help us transform how we do things? The second bucket is feasibility. Can we actually do it? Is it something that's feasible for us to do? And then the last bucket would be viability. Will it return the intended value? And I think a lot of times we can get trapped in automation is always going to make things faster, better, stronger, but it's not always the case, right? And so make sure you're really critical in assessing, will it return the intended value? And that's why it's so important to have cross-functional partners that help you make this assessment, right? Because it's not on, product or technology or finance or any one team to assess all those different areas. It has to be a collaborative approach. Otherwise, it's going to be one-sided, and you're not going to really get the right assessment across the board there.
Yeah, I think the last line here, we got the arrow sticking in the bullseye there, and call it increasing relevance to your objectives. If the objectives and the pressures and the expectations are flexibility, insight, visibility, efficiency, and control, how does faster payments and how do better payments and better payment processes help us to get there? And it's just better information, better transparency. What are the objectives that people have, not just to be more flexible, to be more scalable, and to be cheaper or free, but the objectives of, meeting the organization's need to transfer value and funds in a way that supports the relationship, engenders better relationship management in a secure manner, as you're also protecting the organization's most liquid assets. So increasing relevance to your objectives requires looking at the process from the beginning to the end, leveraging some of these newer technologies, better payments, better methods of driving that type of behavior. And all of those there's overlap between each of these areas, right? One area, if it starts to fall down, impacts another area. If you have a bad payment process, the receivables area is going to call and say, how do we apply this? Because you didn't send the details. Now you have two people doing an exception process or a defect to resolve an issue. So thinking about things from end to end, a data mindset, a faster view mindset, all of those help address some of the objectives. Now, a lot of you who are on this webinar are expecting a poll question, but you still have to wait because Pat is going to talk about enhancing the payment processes.
Yeah, well, and I think that, the big thing here is how good is the data you're using to take action. This is a very simple framework that a mentor of mine introduced me to years ago, and I use it all the time as we try to help make smarter decisions. And one of the things that is a challenge for a lot of us is we tend to start at the bottom of this pyramid with what data do we have? And then we, maybe can make some insights from it, and then we use that to take action. But to build on Craig's comments on relevancy to your organization and the objectives of your organization, there's an inherent assumption in that process that the data that you've been collecting over years is still organized in a way that's relevant to your current objectives. And speaking from Deluxe's standpoint, the transformation that we've been under over the past 5 years, right? We have systems and tools in place that have been around for much longer than that, but our objectives as an organization have changed dramatically. And if we just look at the data and just are sort of restricted to what decisions we can make based off of going from the bottom to the top, we are going to be handcuffed by our ability to really understand how these different data points inform decisions to our current objectives. So my advice would be rethink how you use data. And instead of starting at the bottom, start at the top, right? Think about the problems that you have and think about the actions that you need to take as an organization. And then ask, what do we need to know to be smarter about those actions? And then you can ask, how can data enable that? right? So instead of just being restricted to the same standard reports that get sent out all the time, and nobody really kind of meticulously going through them, just sort of accepting it as that's what the report is and that's what we're going to use. Challenge that, right? Challenge how that data can work better for you, and really start with the actions you need to take and work down instead of starting with the data that you have and working up.
Is there a, not to get us off track too much, but is there an example of the, um, why looking at action first makes a difference? I mean, that makes sense, right? Start with the macro and then move to the bottom. I mean, one thing I was thinking of, I don't know if this is a good example of, if you don't provide enough details, it breaks the process. You want to make sure people have enough details. So maybe the information is sent and provided ahead of time, but it's all there so they can post it. Is that an example? Are there other examples or another
Yeah,
example you give?
yeah, I think that works. I think another example that we look through is, on my side, I work in um, looking at the implementation process for onboarding uh, new customers. And there's certain processes that we've used and metrics that we've captured on that process. But as we try to accelerate some of the ways that we can bring customers into our ecosystem faster, some of those metrics don't necessarily apply to this new objective that's in more of a transformation stage. And so if all we're sort of looking at is the data that we have today, we may make smaller decisions based on what data is being presented to us versus rethinking at a higher level, making some bigger leaps of what we could be doing, and then figuring out what is the data, what do we need to track in order to understand if we're making progress. So I think it's more about the framework of how you look at the data and use the data to move forward through the process that can be applied in a bunch of different areas, right? And it's not just, in product or finance or technology, right? It's about how do you make sure that you're not, the constraints you have around decision making aren't artificial, right? Because it's just using old mechanisms.
Yeah, and Pat, just one thing to add there, right, is it can also help inform tools and systems that you need, right? It can inform technology strategies across the board based on if you figure out, do I have the data I need? Is there a different way to get the data that I need? And that can help you inform very, very big long-term technical decisions.
Excellent. Thanks for that dialogue. We have our first poll question up. It's a select one and then hit submit. I've got a couple of things. I just want to continue a little bit of that dialogue. Maybe conversely to what you said about the start from the top to the bottom. I always think about, we have these new payment formats, faster payments, ISO 20022, different formats that allow you to send enriched information. Your originating system, your payment platform, your bank, just because you have room for more enriched data, you still have to put it in there to make it work, because then you can use it. I think that's that can be a lost opportunity from our old restrictive methods of passing data, right? It's an old payment rail, limited areas. So in the chat box, there is a section to follow Deluxe on LinkedIn and follow Strategic Treasurer on LinkedIn. Please do that. We enjoy that. Our marketing teams love that. And if we keep them happy, life is much better for everybody. They're great teams, and that's great. So hopefully you can see the poll. There's some instructions in the chat box about how to find it if you can't see it. So what is the biggest challenge your organization is currently facing in relationship to payments? Pick one of those and hit submit. And then if you're interested in having and seeing the results from all the poll questions, type in DX25 for Deluxe 25 or Deluxe in the chat box. If we get, let's just say 125, we'll send out the results to everyone here a week or so after the event. That's just our way of making sure people are paying attention and that you love data as much as we love data. All right. Identifying and implementing automation opportunities, 36%. Reducing friction between systems. That's great because that lines up with our a lot of our content. Yeah, I'm gonna just from a time perspective, I'm gonna move on to the reducing friction slide just so we can keep on track. A lot of good information. Thanks everybody for responding to that. And Pat, if you could get us going on the reducing friction between systems, that was certainly a key response we just saw.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'll kind of hit these first two because they're tightly coupled in terms of, we have lots of legacy systems, manual processes, handoffs, and um, there's inherently a lot of opportunity in there to introduce some automation. But I think one of the things that can be overlooked is these poorly designed processes. And one of the number one triggers that I have for looking for innovation opportunities is if you ever hear, that's the way we've always done it. And I think that if you take nothing else away from what I've been saying, remember that if you hear that's the way we've always done it, that is a great opportunity to dig into how to remove friction from things. Because again, back to a lot of processes and things that have been designed may not have been designed with the future in mind, right? And may not have been designed with the current objectives of the organization in mind. So, what I recommend doing is, as simple as this sounds, get the team together, whiteboard out the process end to end, put stars on where the key points of friction are, and then conduct a little brainstorm session to identify what could we do to solve this one point of friction, right? And if you keep doing those things, you can start to see an entire process become optimized. You can find spaces to remove manual work and introduce automation. But if you, again, think just within how do I optimize a bad process, you're already starting out behind the eight ball, right? So you have to take a step back and think, why are we even doing it this way in the first place? Which can be hard, right? Because it requires us to take off our expert hat and put on a more challenger type hat. But I think it's going to be important if we want to remove friction to really, take that deep look at it.
Yeah, Pat, to add to that, I'll put money on that. One of those stars would be exceptions. Craig mentioned it earlier, and it's mentioned here again, end to end to end to end. When these exceptions happen, it becomes a compounding impact, right? And it just keeps on becoming worse and worse. So a lot of folks out there, trying to implement AI-based anomaly detection, and just to explain that a little bit and hopefully use an easy to consume analogy. When detecting anomalies, you're leveraging huge data sets, and you're really just detecting deviations from the norm. So if you think almost like a cluster plot graph, norm would be big clusters, and little anomalies or like extreme items or outliers would be the areas that you want to investigate. And a good analogy I've used in the past has been, if you think about smart homes, you can buy water pressure detectors that you can install into your main water line now. That it's basically just constantly monitoring your water pressure, and throughout different times of the day, water pressure will rise, it'll fall, but it'll determine what is a decent baseline. And the moment something, as an example, water pressure is low at a period of time, it's normally high, you get a notification, right? So think about AI-based anomaly detection like that. And something that is very, very important is it goes hand in hand with feedback loops. Very, very important. If there's anything, like you mentioned, Pat, if there's anything to take away from what I'm saying, everyone needs to understand automation and machine learning is not set and forget, right? It's very, very important to understand that automation does not equal autonomy. These solutions need oversight. You'll hear terms like human in the loop to provide feedback, and it's likely going to be a change in the future of work in terms of how we deploy subject matter experts, right? So when we think about the future of work, I don't think it's doom and gloom. I think it's repositioning the experts to be in the right place. And I think who was it? I think it was a VP of technology at Visa who is predicting or foreseeing a future where managers in this payment space will be responsible for overseeing or managing 8 to 10 automation agents. And so it's interesting to think about that, you know, how people and our subject matter expertise are going to be applied to the future. And obviously at the core of that is, again, data quality. I know a lot of companies that are implementing centralized data repositories. You hear data lakes, data lake houses, things like that. It's all about getting that enriched information, standardization, and making sure that you don't have bad or missing or disconnected data, because stock standard, garbage in equals garbage out.
It'll be interesting to see how those reviews of the bots sound. Bot number 6, your work was very effective or not. Yeah, so the fourth item here, bad, missing, or disconnected data. If we're going to train our AI and machines on data, well, it needs to be complete, it needs to be accurate. But even before that, to have a clean process, the data needs to be accurate. If you there's a mess up on the ordering process, what gets shipped could be wrong, what gets placed on invoices can be inaccurate. All those create that feedback loop, that exception that is a defect that requires a lot of time. So methods of ensuring the data is clean, the data quality measures are in place. The traditional ones matter, as well as using AI and machine learning to detect those anomalies before they become an actual problem in the system. This doesn't look right. What's the problem? And we're used to that now. Most companies have data loss prevention. If something's getting sent out and it looks like it's got a Japanese EIN number, it might block it and say, this looks like an error. You're sending something out that shouldn't be done. And so using those tools to help that matters significantly. In a similar way, the siloed systems and lack of integration is the problem of information needs to be part of the overall process. We're used to systems are siloed. Everyone's responsible for their own stovepipe or silo, depending on where you are in the world, which makes sense. But there's a handoff, and we've long had this linear view where one system to the next system to the next system, the next system. If 5 steps down, they find out that you're missing information for a compliance reason, or it's inaccurate, then everything goes back to the beginning. So the integration, the ability to fix items en route, all of these things matter. And the ability to look at it as a transaction where everyone's reading the transaction, enhancing it with information, is part of where things are going on the payment front and engaging with others. So it's more of a platform than the telephone game where there's a message that's relayed across the board. So those are a few of the things to think about. How do we reduce friction? We think differently about data. We think differently about processes and platforms. All right. Now, so we reduce friction. That brings us to enabling faster processing. I'll start, and then Mike and Pat, you can jump in. So on this chart, how do we meet the demand for speed? Not everything has to be instant. Nothing's getting slower. We want to be able to increase the speed of things. There's value in information. There's certainly opportunities. So if you can see the lines drawn to some of the areas, where are the key opportunities to increase speed? Within our own systems, as we process and send to the bank, and the decision on what payment rails we use, right? Certain payment rails are batch processes or they're slower, but there's an increasing number of faster payment rails. Those are the core areas that we can focus on. The other areas, like what bank we deal with, what tech we use within the system, what our partners use, the information doesn't just have to come from our trading partners' bank to them. There are other elements as well. So I don't mean to exclude those areas from how we enable faster processing. But there's opportunities to increase speed. What can be automated? What can be eliminated? What can we change from 4 steps with a recycle process if there's an error? Those can be changed. So a couple options. If you look under processing, do we have a nightly batch job? Well, that works great for a number of things. But what about real time or near real time? If something's happening, we need to communicate information. We need to originate a payment. there's certainly a lot of use cases where the payment needs to move faster. There's significant value. Other times we need more complete data. Almost every time we need more complete data. But operating within our companies, we're moving away from nightly batch flows of information to frequently moved information in groups to a more streaming oriented environment as systems are replaced and as data moves across. The same way, the newer payment rails allow much more information to be sent, better formats, more information, the ability to add more information as time goes on without breaking either the payment rail or the recipient's underlying system. You know, the old style, the limited formats, you knew what everything was that came through the file based on its location. There's no descriptors on it. If you go ahead and start to add more fields of information, the receiving system is like, I don't know what that's for. But some of the newer formats, the XML or ISO 20022 standards, allow you to put more information without having to redo your systems and your recipient systems. Where does that matter? Okay, all of a sudden you have to include more address information for certain types of payments, the changes required in these countries and these jurisdictions. Well, now you can add that information. Now it's available. Those that can use it, use it. Those that don't, it's extra information that doesn't break their system. So in summary, on the bottom, it's nothing's moving slower. Not everything has to be instant. There are certainly really good use cases for instant, but everything has to get better over time. That's the overall efficiency driver we have for our economies, but also for our companies. Mike, I'll flip it over to you to fill in.
I'd really like to touch on what most people see as the problem hitting everyone head on right now around ISO 20022 standardization. I see this as a huge opportunity, not just for standardization across the payment networks, but also internally. If you ask yourself and look inside your own company, the amount of file movement that happens, imagine if it was all the same format and you don't need to actually think about analyzing how to integrate and make sure that data can move from point A to point B without an issue, right? It's actually a huge opportunity, and I would highly encourage everybody to look inside versus creating, say, just an external wrapper to meet the standard.
All right, that brings us to our second slide for a poll question. It's a double stacked poll question. There's two of them. They're both select one. Top one is, how do you currently approach payment automation within your organization? And the second, what is the biggest barrier to faster payments in your organization? So go ahead and select those and then submit. Right, when you're done in the chat box, we're short 40 to hit our number. I can't remember what number I said, if it was 125, 150 or something like that. But go ahead and submit those. We'll get those out to everybody. And then Pat or Mike, if one of you wants to say anything on either of the responses that come up, I'll invite you to do so as soon as that looks good. One of the regulatory limits, does that include current limits of RTP? That's a question. Why don't we just take that while it goes? I would say it's a limiting factor, whether it's purely regulation or it's the payment network including that. I would say that is a limitation, right? It might limit the use and effectiveness. Pat, I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add on that.
No, I think you said that well. I don't have anything else to add.
So you have the answer. So Mike, I'll flip it over to you. Anything on number one that stands out?
It's interesting that there seems to be a pretty equal spread. It means my read of this is that everybody is in process, understands its importance, which is great. I mean, it resonates with the topic at hand, what we're presenting. I love seeing 27% with a significant portion automated, right? So that means there's a lot out there that are a little more mature in the process and have a lot of learnings that hopefully can be shared across.
Yeah, this is probably a more automation friendly, automation in process audience than the general population, but still that's very encouraging. The last one was the biggest barriers. Number one, lack of system integration, which we cover quite a bit here. Limited budget or resources, number two. Pat, anything that you want to add on that?
Well, I actually put limited budget or resources and resistance to change from stakeholders kind of together, right? Because oftentimes the stakeholders are going to be the ones with the keys to budget and resources. And if they don't see the compelling story, then it's going to be hard to unlock those budget and resources. And so while, I think about how you can come together as a team and put together a compelling narrative so that stakeholders see it as a no-brainer, right? Then all of a sudden, budget becomes a much easier conversation if you can are really clearly articulate time saved or liquidity changes, things like that that allow you to have a message that resonates with the stakeholder. Budget and resources should be a fast follow to that.
Thanks for your comment. So, yeah, if you just continue the dialogue on automation priorities, about eliminating manual tasks is a key area.
Absolutely. And as I mentioned earlier, on how you assess these and how you prioritize them, in order to really find what to even look at to begin the prioritization conversation, I think there are a couple areas that I'll hit on that we tend to look at, and it's what are things that aren't necessarily high value tasks for a human to do, right? There are a lot of things that, you know, humans are really good at and thinking critically and problem solving and things like that that AI and automation can't do. Um, but there are a lot of things that, we should look to free up that capacity for those individuals to do that type of work. And what I would say is look at the tasks where whether it's in, reporting or document processing, look at the things that you find your teams being very reactive in versus proactive. And if you can find ways to sort of flip that switch so that your teams can start taking on more proactive tasks, because some of the things that are more reactive that they have to handle are solved for with some automation, that's a really good place to look because oftentimes, and again, guilty from the corporate pressure slide of sending in a request to finance to pull a report. That's not necessarily a high value task, right? The outcome of it is high value, but the work going into it isn't necessarily high value. It's something that, a machine could do. But if I need to sit down with my finance partner and really work through the numbers and come up with where the opportunities are, that's those higher value tasks. So what are the things that tend to drive more reactive behaviors? How do you find ways to automate those? That's one area. And then the time consuming tasks, right? This is look at all of the workbooks you have that require manual entry and identify how much of that is actually required to be manual entry, right? And again, thinking about that trigger of this is the way we've always done things, right? I'm sure that there's pretty big Excel spreadsheets that are used constantly as mechanisms for measuring things that have just been the same way over and over again, but take a lot of manual work to update and maintain. Are those areas that take a lot of time and don't necessarily yield the value for the time spent? So those are kind of two areas that, I really like to focus on in terms of looking at manual tasks. Mike, I know you've got a couple others in mind.
Yeah, yeah. We've identified some pretty common and standard like opportunities that are ripe for automation. But it is important, touching on this third area to consider the technologies. Really important to learn what each are and what each are good at. right? So RPA, as an example, robotic process automation, is really good at very linear-based decision making. If this, then else. It is not good in an unstructured world, right? It's not a learning solution like machine learning is. At the same time, machine learning is almost like an overkill if you already know a predetermined automation flow of yes or no. I'll touch on outsourcing as well. We have the belief that innovation is a collaborative effort, right? Gone are the days of one group trying to do everything. So look out there, because there are a lot of companies out there that are so far ahead in this space, and you can take advantage of their economies of scale. So you don't necessarily have to invest all of that effort, time, and resources to building something in-house, when if you identify your needs, you understand that you have very specific needs, you don't necessarily need the whole kit and caboodle, so to speak.
Excellent. All right, so we get to our last poll question. We have enough people who've typed in DX25 in the chat. No more needed. This is a select all that applies. How do you expect AI and data-driven solutions to impact your payment processes in 2025? It'll optimize decision-making, it'll enhance fraud detection and security. We plan to use data for personalized services, not considering AI or data-driven solutions yet. It's select all that apply, but if you select not considering and unsure, you probably shouldn't select the ones above it. And I'm going to put the other slide up while people answer that, just so it's queued up and ready to go. Pat, if you could be ready to go in just a moment. Once the slides start showing, feel free to continue. We do have enough responses. So thanks for filling that in on the chat box and for responding to the poll questions. All right. Interesting. Enhanced fraud detection and security, certainly doing that already in a number of cases. Optimized decision-making, 31%. Not considering AI or data-driven solutions yet, about a quarter, and 20 are unsure. Excellent. Thanks for that. Everyone will get a copy of those results. So, Pat, if you would.
Yeah, I think, and Mike, you were going to speak to this one, right?
Yeah, sure. I can jump in here. We don't have to spend a ton of time on this. I think we've touched on identifying automation opportunities. This is something that we definitely wanted to showcase, just as we're seeing this in a lot of places. A lot of people are taking advantage of this opportunity. Document automation, combination of OCR, or optical character recognition, as well as generative AI, or what people will refer to as natural language processing. So your ability to interact with an OCR solution to extract data and organize it the way you need it organized, or to extract specific types of information. So this is being used a lot for contract strategy we're seeing in the industry, whether that be understanding, if AI is a hot topic right now, understanding of all of your existing contracts, which clients or customers have AI specifics in the contract. Do they also have it in the MSA? Can we do a table comparison? I think we've seen some pretty astonishing positive results versus pulling 5 to 6 people out to go review 500 contracts or 500 contractual documents. Being able to pump that into pre-existing systems and analyze that data and extract it in a readable format allows you to make very, very quick decisions, or at least understand where are we going, say, with our product suite, data strategy, and data direction. Who is that potentially going to impact? Who do we need to have conversations with early on? So this is just something, a prime use case that I think everyone can take advantage of. Legal documents exist throughout every company. So definitely take a look at some of the case studies out there.
That's excellent. There are so many for sure that that make sense, and there's more that are coming up. So this brings us to our key takeaway slide, or final thoughts. Pat,
yeah,
Mike, and then me.
Yeah. So again, as I said earlier, it's all about how to make the data work for you, right? And I think that oftentimes we can be just let the data be as it is, and we just use it as it is today, and don't really make it effective. And so think about inverting that pyramid, right? Think about starting with the actions you need to take, what insights you need to learn about, and then figure out how to make the data inform those things.
great. I'll touch on AI. Everybody's going to tell you they have an AI solution or AI is in their solution. A funny little side topic. Not so long ago, I went out to buy a washing machine, and the salesman told me that the washing machine had AI. So everyone's going to say they have AI in their solution. So just remember that you have to start asking the right questions. It's not a panacea. It's not going to be the solution for you. It's a how to solve the solution. So start asking more pointed questions around, can you tell me what it does to help me, and explain the problem that you have, right? And if it's not tailored to your needs, it may not solve your problem. Don't over-engineer if you don't have to.
You got me thinking about what AI would be used in the laundry machine, but
Is
that's
it washing your clothes for
I
you?
was thinking that'd be an expensive washing machine.
it reorders your jeans because it noticed rips. Awesome. The at the end, enable faster processing. The idea that we want to move faster is really the idea we want to move more efficiently and move at the right speed. And so this requires the right tools, the right systems, this right structure that is increasingly automated and increasingly enhanced automated, like AI, that allow us to improve the efficiency, reduce errors. Friction is brought about by not having data, having incorrect data, having manual processes and defects occur. So all these things, all of these items tie together, for this idea of what are the evolving corporate needs and how do we address those? And so increasing relevance, engaging automation IT to help you get there will enable faster processing. That's a process, a people, a system, a tool, and a partner view. So I want to thank Pat and Michael and each of you for listening in on today's webinar. Brian has some additional key bits of information and a resource for you as well. So we'll turn that back over to him. Thank you.
Indeed, thank you everyone for joining us today. The CTP credits, today's webinar slides, and a recording of today's webinar will be sent to you within 5 business days. And for more on succeeding in payments in 2025, be sure to register for our next webinar with Deluxe on the AP Automation Readiness Survey results by clicking the link in the chat box. Thank you, and we hope you have a good rest of the day.